A lot of times when I talk to people in the church, the Old Testament presents something of a mystery. Raise your eyebrows if you have ever begun reading the Bible and stopped in either Genesis or the book of Numbers. Quite a few people out there. And so what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks is we are going to go through, thank you, we're going to go through the entire Old Testament in 3 messages. So we're going to go pretty quickly through it, and we're going to do so in a very different way. And you may feel silly doing this, so I just want to give you just an example of why we're going through it in this way. I'm going to show you a few letters, and I want you all to memorize these letters. I'm going to give you like 3 seconds to look at them. Ready? 2, 3. All right. Who's got them? Let me show you the same letters again. I'm just going to change them a little bit. So the same letters, same order, grouped a little bit differently, suddenly becomes far easier to memorize. So what we're going to do as we go through this, and you have, I think the ushers passed out sheets, a lot of you have when entering. All of these steps are going to be in front of you, and what we're going to do as we go through this, we're going to stand up and move a little bit. And so if standing is difficult for you or whatever, you're fine. At certain points, I'm going to ask those who are able to stand. And we're going to go through the story of the Old Testament using hand signs. And as we move our body, that is just one of those things that makes things so much easier to memorize. So I would tell you, nobody is too old for this. Younger kids, nobody's too cool for this. We all agree on that? Yeah. Amen? All right. So in front of you, you've got these sheets. And it also will tell you all the books of the Bible about where they fall as we go through the story of the Old Testament. You all ready to begin? All right. So in the beginning, God creates everything. And so it says God creates the heavens and the earth. It's just a shorthand for saying everything. So our first sign is number 1, creation. Move your hands in a circle. Creation. And stop at the top. God creates everything. And so the very next thing God does, though, is he leaves humans in charge. This goes predictably bad. And so the next thing that happens is after creation is the fall. We mess everything up. So humans have broken the perfect creation that God did. And so Cain kills Abel after Adam and Eve eat the fruit. Cain kills Abel, and it just continues. And people get worse and worse and worse off. Until finally God decides to wipe out almost all of his creation. And then you have the flood. And so you have creation, you have the fall, and then wiggle your fingers, rising floodwaters. Go back up to the top. All right, so just to recap, you have God makes everything, humans mess it up, God floods the world. By the way, the hand signs are not my own. This is largely from the Walk Through the Bible series. They have some fantastic books if you're looking to get into the Word of God. But all the illustrations I can blame nobody else but myself for. All right, so creation, then you have the fall, and then the flood. And the next thing that happens is you have God's people. So Noah and his family, they get off the ark. And God had told them to fill the earth and subdue it. But there's a problem because they get off the boat and everybody hangs out in one spot. And then they begin to get arrogant about themselves and their achievements. And they begin to build a tower saying, look at what we can do. We can reach God himself. And so the next thing that God does is he confuses their languages. All of this is in the book of Genesis. Some of you understand none of that. I'll admit of myself, I just don't get emojis. Sorry, kids. So all of a sudden, everybody goes from speaking the same language to everybody's talking a different language. I've lived this out on a construction crew, and let me tell you, when you don't speak the language of your coworkers, it's confusing. I have no idea. And so what happens And so we've had the flood. What happens is you have nations form. And it's like the spreading of your hands. So everybody do that together. Nations form. Now, if you talk to people who study languages, pretty much everybody agrees that all of human languages can be traced back to a single starting point. And so then the first 11 chapters of Genesis, this is where we've gotten to, and it describes the origin of the world as it was then. So everybody stand up if you can with me, and we'll do our first four, and you'll feel super great about your ability to learn this so far. If you're not able to stand, you're fine where you are. Say it out loud with me. We'll start at the beginning. Creation, fall, flood, nations. Great job. You memorized 4 things already. You can have a seat. Now, I was considering maybe at the end of this, like having a test. Oh, I don't know about that. All right. We'll keep it joyful here then. We won't have a test on this at the end. So the next thing that happens, the first 11 chapters tell the story of God creating everything and how the world got to how it was. Then, the rest of Genesis, it begins to tell the story of how God creates a nation for himself. So not just the whole world and all nations, but God chooses an old guy named Abraham. And so the sign for Abraham is pointing. God tells Abraham, go! And Abraham goes. So God just chooses a random old guy. He's like 75 years old. And he says, Abraham, I'm going to give you kids. You don't have any kids. I'm going to give them to you. In fact, I'm going to make a whole nation out of your descendants. He says, I want you to go to this land that you've never been to. I'm going to give this land to your descendants, and they're going to fill it. And I'm going to bless you. And everybody who blesses you, I'm going to bless them. And everybody who curses you, I'm going to curse them. And so the story of Abraham is God choosing to bless someone. Abraham had done nothing really up to that point. That's the first introduction we're given. So Abraham, he says, go. Now, I'll just say this about Abraham's wife, Sarah. If Mr. Charlie went home to Miss Jerry and said, Jerry, I spoke to God today. 1, you're having a baby. 2, we're moving to Canada because God's going to give our kids Ontario. And Miss Jerry goes with him. They pack up the whole family, and Abraham goes. And so next we're going to learn some geography. So we've got, do it with me, creation, fall, flood, nations, Abraham. So the next thing is learning the region that all of this is talking about. So if you look at Google Earth, you've got the Mediterranean Sea. There's this tiny area where most of the Bible takes place. That's where Israel is located. So the next hand signs, we're going to learn some of the geography of the area. And so we're all going to point up at the screen. The bottom, that lake there, that is the Dead Sea. So make a circle with your finger, Dead Sea. Now, if you go to the Dead Sea, it's super cool because there's so much salt in it, you just float like a cork. You'll also die if you drink too much of it. So that's the Dead Sea at the bottom. And then that river going up there on the right is called, anybody know? The Jordan River. And so the hand sign, it's all in the wrist now. Watch, you ready? Ready to do that? So you've got nobody's too cool for this, all right? Dead Sea, Jordan River, and the dot at the top there, that is the Sea of Galilee. That is where Jesus and his disciples spend a lot of time sailing around. So remember, you've got Abraham, God tells him to go. Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee. You know the big blue thing on the left-hand side? We said it before. That is the Mediterranean, everything to the left. And so that next sign is, move your hands, just sweep out. Mediterranean, like that. Everybody staying with me? The land between. So you've done the Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Mediterranean. The land between is Israel. So Israel's like this. All right, you guys think you're following so far? Let's stand up again if you're able, and we'll try and get up to this point. All right, ready? Creation, fall, flood, nations, Abraham, Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Mediterranean, Israel. Good job. Have a seat. Give yourselves a hand. That's 10 so far. Now, I will admit, one, I've done this before multiple times. Two, I've gotten them written down in front of me, so I've got a cheat sheet. But I'll encourage you, especially if you're a family, you got your kids, if you go home and practice this with them, it is a great way. We're going to do it on Wednesday nights with our kids program as well, adults. And I'm going to just give a challenge. I haven't decided exactly what, but if anybody under the age of 12 can come back at the end of this and do all hand signs, all 66 of them by the end, I'm going to have a special treat or something waiting for them. I'm sorry, no.
How about under the age of 12 and over the age of 50?
We'll see. All right, so we've got through the first 10. So God tells Abraham to go. And he also tells him you're going to have kids, which is interesting because when you're introduced to Abraham, his name is Abram, which means exalted father. Kind of ironic, right, for guys 75 didn't have any kids. Introduces, hi, my name is Exalted Father. So God promises him, Abraham, I'm going to not just bless you kids, you're going to have a nation. Years pass. They've moved to the promised land. The promised land, they've moved there. And it's been like 13 years. Can you imagine what that's like for them? 13 years waiting. They believed God. They went there. They did what he had told them to do. And after 13 years, you'll notice here, Abraham, on his 100th birthday, when he was 100 years old, he had the promised child. But before that, 13 years in, they had Ishmael. See, they tried to outsmart God. They tried to help God along and his plan and purpose. And so Abraham's wife, Sarah, said, hey, it's been 13 years, and I'm really old. Maybe God didn't exactly know what he was talking about, so I want you to take my handmaiden. And I want you to have the baby with her. Massive problems and thousands of years of warfare result when people try and help God out in his plan. So the next sign is the teenager there, not too happy about all of this. That is Ishmael. And so the sign for Ishmael, tapping your head because Abraham and Sarah decided to try and help God out. God, though, tells Abraham and Sarah, look, I meant it when I said you both will have kids. Another, 12 and a half years passed. It has been 25 years since that initial promise was made. And Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. So you're going to like this. The sign for Isaac, touch your eye. Isaac. Everybody get it? Lane Pastor. All right, but you remember. So Isaac. So you have Ishmael trying to outthink God. The child of promise is Isaac. So God makes the same promises as Isaac grows up that he made to Abraham. God chose Isaac to bring about his plan for the world. Isaac has two twins. Their names are Esau and Jacob. And I'll explain why I drew them that way here. So we've got Ishmael, Isaac. The first one is Esau, and he is the firstborn. And Esau's name means hairy. The baby comes out, and they look at him and say, that's a hairy kid. So they named him Esau. He's the one on the left, if you couldn't guess. Esau's name means hairy, and his nickname is Edom, which means red. And so I just picture Esau as being covered in red fur. So Esau, rub your arm, like really hairy. One of those dudes who goes to the beach and takes off his shirt and has a sweater kind of deal. That's Esau. His brother, born immediately after them, twins, born grabbing his heel. His name is Jacob, which means heel grabber, which also means trickster. And so Jacob is a smooth operator. Rub your face, smooth. Unless you got a beard, smooth. So you've got Esau and Jacob. Let's do the four there as we talk about the kids here. So you've got Ishmael and Isaac are brothers, and then Esau and Jacob. So Jacob is a smooth operator. And what happens is before they're even born, remember God promised Abraham 3 your descendants. Before Esau and Jacob are even born, God tells Isaac, I'm going to give my promises to the younger son. Later on, one of the prophets talks about this, says God just chose Jacob before he had done anything. God's grace and his favor is never something that we can earn. And especially in a culture that's so valued, the firstborn son was the most important son. He got the biggest share of the inheritance. God chose the younger son. Just like God chose an old guy to have babies, God repeatedly says, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So God chose Jacob, but Jacob is a trickster, right? And so he goes to his brother, and his brother's getting the larger share of the inheritance. He cheats his brother Esau out of the inheritance. And then when their dad is dying, he cheats his brother Esau out of his father's blessing, pretending to be his brother to get his blessing. Jacob is a trickster. Later on, Jacob wrestles with God himself. Tells you something about his character. I know some people wrestling with God. And he wrestles with God, and God renames Jacob Israel, which means struggles with God. Did you know that about the people of God? Their very name, which as we'll cover the rest of their history, kind of sets the course of what we're going to have happen. Israel struggles with God. All right, let's go all the way through. You can remain seated. We'll go all the way through up to this point. Everybody ready? All right. Creation, fall, flood, nations. Abraham, remember geography now. Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Mediterranean, Israel, and we've got the sons. Ishmael, not thinking God, Isaac, Esau, and Jacob. All right, so Jacob, you guys are doing good. Some of you are watching your neighbor. That's fine. All right, so Jacob now, he has 12 sons. You imagine that household. 12 sons. And one of the youngest sons, Joseph, becomes his favorite. And then it says that he gave him a beautiful robe to wear. Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So now, to understand what this is like for his siblings, have you ever felt like your parents had a favorite child and it wasn't you? So back then, for Joseph to be given this special robe, imagine your parents buy your younger brother a brand new Mustang when he turns 16. And you're still driving that hoopty car that your grandpa, passed down that's older than you are. And you're looking like, what's the deal? That is how Joseph's brothers felt about him. And so they actually debated killing him at one point. I don't know if you had that kind of a family growing up. I don't know. If I had more than one brother, I'm sure at one point there would have been discussions like that. But they end up selling Joseph into slavery to Egypt. And so the sign for Joseph is two of them. Joseph, he has the robe, the coat. Joseph to Egypt. And if we go back to the geography here, Egypt is going to be down and to the left. So Joseph, and point to Egypt, he goes to Egypt. Now God's plan is working in all of this, and he is with Joseph in Egypt, and he ends up using Joseph to save the entire nation when famine hits. And then the rest of the family ends up moving to Egypt with Joseph when the famine gets too severe in the land of Israel. So you have Joseph who goes to Egypt, and then the Jews also go to Egypt. All right, let's start just from Ishmael so everybody's together here. So we've got Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Egypt, Jews, Egypt. Very good. We've got one section left to go here. You guys will be great. So what happens when they get to Egypt is this. At first, Joseph is a national hero. God brings him to a position of importance. He's second in command to Pharaoh himself. And so everybody appreciates, gotta get back there. Everybody appreciates Joseph. This, by the way, is the family tree. Got Abraham, old guy, right? The descendants of Ishmael, by the way, and the descendants of Isaac to this day in the Middle East are still fighting. So you've got Abraham, Isaac, Esau, Jacob has the 12 sons, so they go to Egypt. And so what happens, though, over time is this, and it's kind of universal human nature that people distrust and dislike foreigners. And that's what happens as the Jews enter Egypt. At first, it's like, oh, yay, Joseph is awesome and his family is here. That's great. They bring his family in, they give them good land to live in. And then they start to multiply, though. It's like, oh, these Jews, there's kind of a lot of them now. And they begin to view them with suspicion. They're not like us. And over time, it leads to them putting them into forced labor. They begin to enslave the Jewish people. And finally, by the time Moses gets on the scene, what began as open arms and celebration, they have not only made them slaves, they have begun killing all the male children that they can find. So the next sign, after Joseph goes to Egypt, the Jews go to Egypt. You'll find this period of time a lot in the Bible. 400 years, like a bracket, 400 years of bondage. 400 years. These are the descendants of Abraham. God had promised to bless them and to give them the land of Israel. And yet here they are living as slaves and outcasts for 400 years. Again, here in America, we think like, we're so old as a country, like 200 some years? That is nothing. 400 years, these people live as slaves. So then God sends them Moses. So the sign for Moses, you've seen Charlton Heston movies, Moses with the staff. So Moses is Moses, and you can say it with some force. Moses is a real go-getter. So Moses, like you have a staff in your hand. Moses, like you're going to part the water. So Moses comes in, and in this time when they're killing all the male children they can, all through this, God's plan is firmly in his control. God preserves the life of Moses. He is raised as a prince in the household of Pharaoh in Egypt. And so Moses, though, when he gets older, he rejects all of this to go and be with his people. Then at the age of 80, God brings Moses back with a mission. And so you have 400 years of bondage. Then Moses comes on the scene, and he tells Pharaoh, "Let my people go," is the next sign. So put your hands to your mouth. "Let my people go." What does Pharaoh say? No. Cross your arms and say no. All right, let's go all the way from the beginning. Stand if you're able. Let's see if we can get to that point. Are you ready? Creation, fall, flood nations. Abraham, remember geography now, Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Mediterranean, Israel, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Egypt, Jews, Egypt, 400 years bondage. Moses, let my people go. No. Say it like a 3-year-old. No. All right, you can have a seat. Good job. So Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, let my people go. And Pharaoh is extremely stubborn. And so what happens next is the 10 plagues as God brings plague after plague on Egypt for refusing to listen to him. And it's interesting, as you look at the plagues, what they're really doing is making fun of a lot of the Egyptian gods. They had, for instance, a god who resembled a frog, and God tells him, you like frogs? We'll see how you like frogs. And frogs swarm over everything. They practically worship the river Nile. And God says, you think that river is impressive? And he turns it to blood. And so all of this, God is showing his dominance over the land of Egypt. At this time, Egypt was the superpower of the ancient world. So the 10 plagues is God declaring very firmly, I am in charge of everything. Can you appreciate the stubbornness of Pharaoh? 10 of these. 10 of these signs. Your people are dying. Your cattle are being destroyed. Your economy is ruined. Darkness is covering your land. You have sores all over your body. And the sign for the 10 plagues, picking fleas off you. 10 plagues. And through all of this, he is so stubborn. His hatred for the Jewish people is so much. He refuses. Sometimes he appears to give and says, I'll let you go, but you can't take any animals with you. And then he changes, no, I'm not going to let you go. I've known people like this. I've known people who have struggled against God like this. And so finally, God brings the final of the 10 plagues. Because they had refused to listen, the firstborn child of every family in Egypt dies. And leading into this, Passover begins. And so the sign for Passover is your thumb, passing over. So God tells the people of Israel to do, and this is one of the reasons why I love covering the Old Testament. He tells the people of Israel, he says, each of you are to take a lamb into your house with your family and let it live with you for a few days. And then you are to take that lamb and you are to kill it. You are to take the blood from the lamb and put it over your doorpost. A life has been taken here. It is to be this life in the place of your firstborn child when I bring the angel of death on the Egyptians. So when we fast forward to Jesus, when Jesus dies on the cross, it is said in the Gospels that he dies at about the same time as the Passover lambs were being sacrificed. So even here, God is painting a picture of what he is about to be accomplished. That the evidence of the death of that lamb meant that the wrath passed over the people. So after the 10 plagues, you have the Passover. Well, that finally does it. And finally, they let the Jews go. Not only do they let them go, they're so eager to get them out of their land, they give them gifts as they go. Please leave us. And God's power was so evident that it says that some Egyptians left with them. They said, we see the power of your God. It is nothing like everything we've been worshiping all of our lives. Please take us with you. So they left with some of the Egyptians with them. You can imagine what Pharaoh does next. Continually changing his mind and stubborn, he pursues them. And he pins them at the Red Sea. And the people complain. right? Because God's been leaving them in all of this, right? And now all of a sudden they find themselves trapped between a sea on one side, no boats, a sea on one side, the most feared army of the ancient world behind them. And they say, God, weren't there graves in Egypt? God, if you wanted to kill us, you could have done it back there. God, do something. And I think it is very much worth noting in our own lives that God knew exactly what he was doing. He intentionally brought them to a place where they would be pinned between a huge barrier and a massive army. And so he tells the people as they're complaining to Moses, tell those people to shut their mouths and watch me save them. Pastor Aaron's paraphrase. Be quiet, stand still, and watch me save you. He is again showing them his trustworthiness. So the next sign is the Red Sea. He parts the Red Sea. So arms like waters, Red Sea. The people walk through on dry ground. Pharaoh's army attempts to follow through and the waters crash on them. The final decisive defeat. God then brings his people, so after they go through the Red Sea, he brings them to Mount Sinai. And that is where we will begin next week. So let's go through all the way from the beginning. Now look y'all, y'all are doing great, because if I told everybody when they came in, look, you're going to memorize 24 things about the Old Testament, most people are like, oh my goodness. All right, well, the kids are even out of school right now. Come on, Pastor Aaron. So let's stand up and see if y'all followed through with me for the first 24 hand signs. So ready? Creation, fall, flood, nations, Abraham, Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Mediterranean, Israel. Now we got the kids. Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Egypt, Jews, Egypt, 400 years, bondage. Moses, let my people go. No. 10 plagues, almost there. Passover, Red Sea, Mount Sinai. Give yourselves a hand. You can have a seat. I had to tell you a proud daddy moment watching Christine do these signs. Cutest thing in the world. Not good.